Well, good afternoon, everyone. It is 2 o'clock, so this Newham local plan examination hearing session is open. I'm William Fieldhouse, the inspector appointed by the Secretary of State to examine that. Can you hear me okay back there?
Yes.
Yes, okay. If you are struggling to hear anyone, just try and let me know and try and make sure either use the microphones or get people to speak up. So a reminder, please, remember to switch their mobile phones and laptops, etc. silent. There are no fire alarm tests planned this afternoon. So if the alarm does go off, we will need to evacuate the building, going out through the door came through, around to the left and out through the section, and around the front of the building and all the way down to the LR station there. So this afternoon we're dealing with a number of policies in the plan related to the high streets and centres. So we've got the 5 o'clock we needed, and I think we probably will need that long, but we've got to around about that time. If we are on that for about 3:15, we'll probably break 15 minutes or so. What we'll do is I'll go through each of the items on the agenda, which hopefully you've seen, which basically are the different policies in the plan relating to different aspects of development related to town centres and high streets. I usually start each agenda item with some questions to the council. When you've heard those, I invite comments from other participants. If you wish to speak, just please put their nameplate vertically blend, and I'll bring them into appropriate time. The council, as is normal practice with local plans, has proposed some main modifications to the plan. The latest version was in a document published on Monday, which is referenced ED 21A, which is on the examination website, and that is staying substantially as the version ED 20 was published the week before, I think. The difference being that the latest version has 3 different colour coding to indicate which category of modification the council considers the what it is proposed to be in the categories that I basically asked it to use, which reflect the legislation in essence, which are main modifications materially affect policies in the plan. They can only be made if I recommend them. I only recommend them if I think the plan as submitted is not required, therefore needs to be changed. So, minor modification are those that council can make, and I don't need to recommend, the council can make. They changes to the plan, it's adopted, don't materially affect the plan's policies. So they can be very minor things like typing errors, factual updates, etc. But there can also be parts of the plan that are policy, which don't they change it, as long as that doesn't materially affect the policy of the plan. So I think there's a bit of discussion to be had around some of the changes the council's proposed and categorised as minor or other changes that may or may not be necessary for soundness or made policies. And so we'll talk about those as we go through each different policy as necessary. So I thought I'd just outline that again for the benefit of those on this week. That was something we talked about this morning and the last 2 days. So are there any questions about that? I've got 2 documents that were submitted yesterday or the day before from investment from Friends of Queen's Market, which I'm going to refer to them as necessary. So as we go through different so other than I'll ask people to introduce themselves in a minute, but if there's any procedural queries, please speak now. Friends of Queen's Market.
Thanks. Is it good to record as we?
Yes, I've got no objections. Does anybody else have any objections to that? No, okay.
And yesterday I tried to hear what you were saying in this session yesterday, but the sound is impossible to understand.
Yes.
So I just wondered, you were doing a bit more about buildings yesterday, and when we had our session for Christmas, we were sort of in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Is it all right to sort of finish that bit off in this session?
Like I said, we're in the middle of it. The discussion I had, I think we have at least two sessions where we talked about
Yeah.
tall buildings in the weeks 1 and 2 hearings, and we had a Tuesday, which specifically discussed the potential modification the council had drafted that was published. Have you seen that?
No,
No. Okay.
that was the thing. I could hear the word tall building.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
understand what you were saying yesterday.
No. Well, it's about if it's the sound quality. I do know that the programme themselves, they thought the sound quality was fine. So I don't know what cancer is. I'm not aware. In terms of tall buildings, I'm not planning to do that today. Maybe if it's related to Queen Street and Queen Market. But that said, there is going to be. I need to think about it. We had a discussion yesterday, and that was about. Let me just get the document reference that it was set out. So the council's response to action points, document ED19. You can find on the examination website either by going to the news update. It was published on the 9th of January. Obviously, the examination document on the 19th. It sets out the council's latest potential modification to tall buildings policy and zones. So I suppose I'll just a very brief update what it does. It sets out in the policy spatial hierarchy of different tall buildings that we talked about, and you were there, I think, in week 1 or week 2. So that's one of the things it does. It sets out the policy that would allow tall buildings outside tall building zones, and there's some limited criteria that would have to be met to allow that. And then thirdly, what the modification did was make some detailed changes to some tall building heights, tall building zone lines, which wouldn't affect Green Street. So you can look at those. There were some further changes that I'm likely asking the council to work in relation to that. So it's possible we'll have a discussion about tall buildings in week 4. So I think what I suggest, if you want to keep an eye on that, I'll look at what the council has proposed. So can we leave it for that for now?
Yeah, I just because there was a sort of from that session which was sort of
yes, it didn't come to a conclusion.
There were a few clarifications I wanted to make, various little things to add.
And that's still the case.
Yeah.
But what you do have.
But I wouldn't.
No, okay. But what you can look at after you've finished it today is the council's proposed modification, and some of it may be of interest to what it's about tall buildings outside building zones, including within. So it is relevant, I suppose, if interested in terms of the Green Street zone, because the policy would allow tall buildings outside the tall building zone in the town centre, subject to the criteria, etc., etc. That isn't, that's for my consideration, and it's also there was further discussion about it yesterday, so there may be further change to that. And the other thing I generally say is, what I try to do as we go through this examination is identify things that may need to be modified and changed, and that's the council to do it, so we can then talk to them. There comes a point, this examination can't keep you on and on back to having further discussions about things. There comes a point where there will be modification, there will be consultation on all the modifications I think are necessary. We'll have a chance to respond in writing to those. And that is the normal process of usually towards the end of the examination. But if even then it is possible, if necessary, to have a further hearing session. But it means these plans never get adopted if not because the examination for too long. So does that process?
I just wanted to make sure that there were at least just a small set of
I think what I will say then is that because it will be probably on a certain further action point of that told earlier, therefore a further iteration of the modifications the council's drafted, there will be another version published hopefully before. Or if not, there will be. I will set out what I think needs to be clarified or changed in what the council has done so far. And therefore, there will be an opportunity to talk about that in week 4. So what I'm saying is, I think that I'm not 100% guaranteeing this. It's likely that the agendas for week 4 will include some point about tour buildings again. So I think if you want to come back and make some limited points about those, that's really the best time to make. Any other procedural questions, points that people wish to make? No. Very briefly, just say who they are.
Afternoon, Antonia Mariano.
Natalie Edmund, Interim Planning Policy Manager.
And Lily Mahoney, Principal Planner.
Corporate Principal Planner.
That's going to DP9.
Isabel Joyce.
Lucy Rogers, member of Friends of Queen.
Julian Stevenson, Monty Evans, Aberdeen.
Frank Kelly, Aberdeen Investments, Galley's Reach.
Okay. Right, okay, thank you. So let me turn to the first item on the agenda, which I'm basically going through the HS policies in order. Quite a lot of them. I mean, it's quite a lot of words in the question. We start with the definition of town centre and in the plan, which includes town centres, which are designated, the town centres, which are divided into the different metropolitan districts. That's the town centres, and the local centres, so listed in the plan, as map, and there are also neighbourhood rates. The question is, of the plan, yes, nationality tends to be what it does say that small collections of uses there of purely neighbourhood significance and should not, well, are not included in the national definition. I think that this adopts slightly, it's not, its approach to town centres is different from the tiers of town centres.
I think there is one thing to clarify, which is one is a definition of what each of them are, which is based on what's the London plan. And the town centre network itself covers all of them as a proxy in a way to help put together all of the designations. But it doesn't mean that the neighbourhood group know for the purposes of and that's clear, I think, in the way they're defined in the glossary and the way that they are treated in the plan.
So, for example, when we talk about sequential tests and impact being applied, the NPPF, that's in relation to town centres. So, well, you tell me.
They would apply to neighbourhood. They would apply, they are not town centres, they're for development in a neighbourhood. They still need to apply.
So they're treated not as town centres.
Exactly. They're not in a town centre. But obviously, as you move through the sequential test, it's like edge of centre, but then these are also designated for.
Yes, I think insofar as that, we can pick up that in relation to each of the different tiers of the policy. But yes, so I understand. So it's well, town centre network. Town centre network. Interestingly, it's got town centre first box. It's got local centres. This came up with today actually, where the local centres are town centres. They are, aren't they?
They are. The purposes of the NDP, we separated them out because we have the tier block plan, which creates additional differentiation hierarchy.
Okay, well, yeah, I don't think I've been. So that's fine. So then the next question was about, well, this categorisation and identification of these areas, it's all done based on taking account of the London plan. And retail study and assessment of the centres and the boundaries to reflect recent boundaries, etc.
Yes. Obviously, since the discussion we've had with yourselves in the first 2 weeks, we've had to have discussions around Beckton Riverside specifically.
Yeah, I'm talking about existing centres.
Oh, the existing centres, yeah.
Yeah. So they're based on basically what's on the ground when you did this assessment work.
Yes, and the recommendations.
Okay, so that's based on evidence. Change over time, those parameters as reasonable as they could be. I don't think there's been too many particular issues to do with the existing judgment of 100%. But yes, then we'll come on. Okay, thank you. So I don't have any questions about that. Then the next question about changes to the existing network proposed, and they form into a number of different elements. So first of which is the transformation of Stratford from a metropolitan centre to an international centre. And that again reflects change that's ongoing in Stratford, and it also reflects its consistent development plan. Yeah, so that's and in the extent to which through the allocation which on the proposed plan, that's that process. Okay. So the next one is the creation of a new district town centre through reconfiguring and capitalising on the trade door scanning reach shopping centre. So I know, thank you, you've asked to come today, you've come today, so I'm very happy to hear what you wish to say. We have got that particular policy relating to N17 SA1 on the agenda for a week or so we're going to look at that. And what I'm going to see before that, hopefully, before the end of next week, I think the council said it will be by Wednesday, is the response to AP 10. Take a common ground between yourselves. EFL?
Yeah,
and St William. Yeah. So I understand that's been worked on and it's being finalised. So that's helpful. So I suppose I may as well ask you now. I have not seen that. I will be looking at the policy related specifically to the Beckton Riverside next on week 4. So what is it that we need to talk about today that to wait until I see that from your point of view?
Yeah, not so. Thank you for providing us the opportunity to be here and obviously that has been coming out session before Christmas.
Yeah.
We've deliberately not tried to avoid going into the weeds about the detailed wording policy, and that will be in subject to our discussions for a meeting tomorrow with Newham and the rest of the stakeholders to try and develop that policy. So what our letter was trying to respond to you really was talking about 2 points really. The first one was going to be how we describe it as the dual catchment area.
Yeah.
So just to explain how, as well as the new town centre serving a local function, which is reflected in the evidence base, it will continue to serve a strategic function reflecting the wider overall Gallions Reef Shopping Park, which will continue. That's the first point. And the second one was out of the questions for Christmas to start developing where we are in terms of where this town centre boundary might be. And so what we've done is, in the letter a few days ago, was to sort of give our first stab at actually what we think is a reasonable first phase part of the town centre. We're not saying that necessarily would be what the town centre eventually has developed, but the reason why we did that was really twofold. Firstly, to inform the discussion we're going to have on stable ground, and to drive sort of a bit of an anchor to that. But secondly, I think also to think about geographically where it would be and also how it would work from a development perspective. So, reason Brian Kelly, my client, is here today, it would be helpful to let him provide some words to inform how that town centre might emerge. Reason why we think it might be helpful to have it first phase, at least in this more confined area closest to the DLR station, and how that might emerge, not least in terms of how retailers might move, but also how retailers might sit along the strategic draw going through shopping park.
Yeah, okay. Right, I've read the letter, so I understand that, and I understand the thinking behind it. And I think I asked some initial questions about how this transformation may take in relation to the existing shopping park. And you seem to be creative when we had this discussion before. And this letter further clarifies that, and about it's not just one something replacing the other, it's very much a kind of side by side thing, and I understand that. Based on I understand the sort of geographical point. Just before I will hand it over to you, in terms of, so two things, there's a blob on the submitted policy plan. I assume that's consistent with what's in the N17 SA1.
Not 100%.
No, okay.
The one on the policies might help. It's more if you take center point of the polygon, and use the site annotation, that's where it sits, rather than where the DLR station would be, which is our kind of starting point. The Newtown Center is DLR, which is better represented.
Right. Well, the other thing I was going to ask you about is there is a non-interactive policy. There's a new DLR station, but
it might come up, but it might come up for Hampside West, because there's a new DLR station there as well.
So I'm looking on.
The problem is that obviously this was very
If I look at the site map for Riverside, that's got a DLR station.
yes,
And the
that's
town centre.
indicative, yes,
Yeah.
because
Okay, understood. So, well, just before I move to that point, and before it's not that dissimilar to what's shown on the master plan. Slightly.
Yeah, if I may add to it, in our sort of Reg 19 representations, we actually tackled this point. So if you spare time, which I know you don't have too much of, we can have a look at that on the new town centre. We thought it'd be useful to have, I suppose, greater clarity about the allocation of that town centre. I think the perfect option referred to it may have been in the wrong location, and therefore, what I think we can do around the discussion with Newham, we can probably remove that. People move on to be a greater clarity for the purposes of the plan to define that town centre. And I think, as long as that figure 3 is replaced by where we may end up, I think that will provide us with a solution.
So figure 3.
Sorry, this was in the original sort of version of the plan that has the famous purple dot.
I mean, nobody thinks about a purple dot.
Yeah.
The policies map, it doesn't have to have. I mean, it may be the best way to get it is to decide map into the changes to if necessary. The site map is qualified being by the modification about it being flexible to some degree. So, whether that is so dissimilar to what you're suggesting may or may not match, I don't know.
I think if things move on away from purple dot drawing into something which I think we can probably agree with Newham, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah. But I suppose what I'm saying, I think you could get away with not if it's difficult to show some of the policy map, because the policy map is meant to define geographically. So you've got the allocation.
I think
The other allocation.
the policy map might be able to be changed, but we may
Yeah,
I think at the moment, otherwise, I think someone who didn't have that familiarity might be confused by that.
I think it's fine. I suppose it's better not to have anything. It's going to be misleadingly specific, whereas presenting it in a more diagrammatic plan like that is another option. Anyway, I'll leave that with you. So in that context, yes. So I'll hand over to you if you want to just set the scene. But I've read the letter, so I do understand. Yeah, sure.
Also, there is.
Do you want to put the mic on? You need to press the button on the top. Put it further. We should go red, green, or red. That's it. I'm just moving quite close to it. Can you just speak?
Hear me okay?
Can you okay hear it back?
It's going to be.
It's sound as
Yeah.
okay. Then if you have any fingers in there.
Yeah, that should be it. Okay. There's just a few points. Obviously, the premise of the DLR coming along is to deliver residential development. There's a certain amount of residential in terms of to delivery in phases. We explained before that it's a light retail park, which is a very successful retail park. So we would see this being an incremental phase delivery of all widespread residential delivery. Our experience is that retailers coming to a new shopping centre is quite difficult to deliver. They need the confidence that there is a catchment there that will come to that and actually delivering on a phased basis. So we don't believe that there's shouldn't be an oversupply of retail because we want to see it. We want to see the retail being taken off. The advantage of having Galleons Reach there is Galleons Retail Park there and having the dual centre is the fact that people still come to Galleons Reach and use the town centre, the new town centre. So I think the scale of that initially needs to be sufficient that can be let up properly at delivery. The other aspect of this is vacant land that we're talking on, so it's actually potentially deliverable without having to take retailers back. And we've got commercial leases with retailers as well, and it's directly adjacent to the DLR new stations. It makes sense to be in that location in our view.
And so yes, okay, understood. And the letter describes how this sort of process of building up the amount of new town centre floor space is managed in relation to winding down ultimately some or all of the older shopping park floor space.
Yes, correct.
So a mixture of some retailers and then move to new premises, etc.
And it will be a mix of larger retailers and small retailers that come into the town.
In terms of going back to what you said about withdrawal catchments, so the retail park has a sort of bigger catchment than retail. In terms of the catchment of the district sectors, what does that mean? Well, what retail leisure sector they are?
Well,
No, go to the yeah,
We can probably both answer it.
yeah, okay. So generally a district
a
centre.
district centre generally would be several neighborhoods together. So the easiest way would be to have a look at the mapping that supports the retail and leisure strategy, which identified 12 zones. They're based on
Household survey.
yes, the household survey, which is postcodes basically, and identifying where people will choose to travel and grouping those in such a way that neighborhoods around each of the existing town centre primarily are
Yeah.
But as the tables in the retail and leisure study indicate, actually there is quite a lot of overlap. People travel from all over to all of the town centres. And in the case of Galleons Reach, it looked at the trade draw for comparison retail. And it draws roughly around 20% from across the variety of areas, including Eastbourne, Beckton area catchment, which shares with East Beckton, etc. So in that sense, yes, we do recognize that there is a wider trade-off there. It's the reason why even the existing local plan, we're identifying this location as suitable for a town centre rather than a local centre, because we recognize there is already a substantial presence there. And really, what we are working towards as part of the SOCG and the agreement is about the transition. How do we efficiently make that transition from what is currently a centre shopping park to look and feel and function more broadly of a town centre. So that's what we're trying to achieve. The policies as drafted, as well as the future town centre.
Can I just say, just I think in my mind, I've got two things I'm trying to understand. One is what the ultimate outcome is, and what this new district centre will be in terms of scale, draw, and so style and makeup. So it would have the characteristics of a traditional town centre, not a newer out of centre. But so it would have the mix of uses, scale and type and public realm and all those sort of things you expect a town centre to have.
Yes, that's the aspiration.
Yeah, that's the aspiration. So that's in terms of scale of district centres in Newham, presumably they are similar. I mean, I'm not saying I'm sure they're not all the same. So you will have an idea of the sort of scale of floor space that district centre will be.
Yes, and that will be in the retail and leisure study as well. And the tricky part here with this specific location is the fact that the retail and leisure study, recognizing both its trivial as well as the substantial amount of comparison floor space already there, is that actually the current trade rule is similar to that of a major center. However, that transition to a town center may change the way the trade rule works, because in part of the trade rule might be because of the car parking available there, which obviously through this process, the idea is to reduce it substantially to be a much more accessible environment and to move to a more typical kind of accessibility where public access, transport access is much more of a for the town center than it currently is.
Okay.
And then there is the capacity of residential being around it, which obviously will support the additional uses that come.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I cut you off and I went off. But that's okay. Get back to you, please.
It's more just to assist you, sir.
Yeah.
One of the evidence documents obviously is the retail and leisure study 2022.
Yeah.
If you go to David 5, to your own time, it has Beckton with C note A along to one row, and the principal figures in terms of actually trade draw, comparison with trade draw, are 2 Galling Street shopping park. So that sort of shows you're getting a draw from literally every single 12 zones, which Newham have actually just referred to. And they vary between 52%, which is right, 25%, down to 7%. But what it does is really, I suppose, compare that with the smaller centres. So, for example, East Ham, which is defined as a major centre, but its maximum trade draw is only 26% in zone 5. So, functionally, Galling Street is sort of operating as a major centre, and that's where the debate has been previously in terms of it. Strategic sort of draw because of the limitations geographically, retailer-wise, of those smaller centres. But to answer your question, Brian can amplify on this. What we're suggesting really is we're thinking about how the local function changes, which will have things beyond retail, so leisure, health, etc. And that will be part of the mix, and that's the reason why I'm suggesting it's in the area closest to where the TLR station will be. So the two things can sit side by side. So we could easily imagine a scenario where, for example, with less car parking because we've got a building on it, that people will walk from car park, but also use buses because they actually already use buses quite extensively there as well into the town centre, which will have more traditional characteristics. Right.
Yeah, okay. So the transition.
Yeah.
So I suppose, as I said, I've got two things in mind. I want to understand what the plan is aiming for at the end, and then you've got this quite complicated process over several years.
Yeah.
Yeah. transition to the new town centre.
And part of the reason why it's been very helpful to engage in discussion about boundary. I think it gives plan making, it makes sense that everybody understands where the focus should be dispersed. These two random sort of unplanned development, which isn't really going to be good place making. And then transition to areas which like closest to sewage works where things may not change that much because we've got to have a buffer to the environmental conditions which are there as well.
Okay, so in terms of the transit, so I think that's helpful to understand the context, to understand, seems to be broad agreement on the outcome. Process by which the transition to two places, one's in this HS, one's R2, I think.
Yes.
And then secondly in the N17 SA1 policy. So both of which seem sensible to way to discuss the words of to week 4, yeah? Yep. We agree on that, yes. So on that basis, is there anything else to?
No, I suppose there is just we do have a sensible way forward, and perhaps Newham can answer that with the suggestion we've got for a first phase of the town centre, which provides a focus, and then we can engage in a wider conversation about phase boundary. So we have certainly about the overall extent of the boundary, because we're going to have these conversations tomorrow next week.
Sorry, when you say the boundary, do you mean the
town centre boundary?
Town centre block, on the, not the pink block, on the side.
A bit more than, yeah.
It's working up indicative boundary within the SOCG, so therefore.
Yes. To live in base. So, thank you, sir.
Thank you. I suppose the context is this plan that's a policy framework, isn't it? And it needs to set what the outcome clearly what you try to deliver at the end, and provide clarity about which will be helpful to achieve that through location and scale, etc. How detailed it could be about the managed process, no, I mean, we can take the starting point of what the plan is and submit it, and we talk about the statement of common ground. So that's all I'll say. What I don't want is to get drawn into trying to sort out the process that's been on over several years through detailed wording in here. Sometimes less could be more helpful.
Very much good.
So that's it's the kind of strategic outcomes and the qualifications and broad scales that the plan is very clear about. The process by which you get there, I think I'll struggle to help you with too much. Okay, so shall we leave it for there for now? And you can look on the statement of common ground tomorrow over the weekend or whatever. Right. So that's not. So that on my question now. I mean, if you wish to leave, I'm not saying you need to leave, but if you wish to leave, you can do a quick break and.
We'll wait till the break.
Okay, fine. Okay, so the next part is about the creation of the next change to the town centre network is the creation of 4 new local centres and the expansion of 3 local centres and site allocations, which we talked about under the allocation policies. But I know that at least one party here that's come back for it again, I think, in terms of the Silver Town keys. Yeah, okay. So we'll look at the top again in a second. Just looking back at what you do your statement in relation to this, if I could. Strategic context again for the creation of new or extended local centres, was the retail measures study, and creating this, making sure there's a local centre, well, all or most places for a local town centre. So that's the kind of broad geography. That's why they are where they are. You say that the preferred boundaries, you refer to planning history of sites, taking into account of agreement or whatever. Yeah. The retail growth, that's the 2022,
Yes.
and the amount of floor space, is that
Yes.
broadly the scale of it?
Yes, we're trying to match where we will be the growth with the growth we know we will have.
Yeah, okay. And then development principles for the site, that's about site planning.
Yes, to help, because historically we've had this requirement to create a existing plans there. And we found that through the development process, just saying that we'll be more a local center is not clear enough, it's not the process enough. And especially in cases where we're extending the local center, we should be more clear on how the idea is already there, but it's also about how it helps achieve the suitable creation of a boundary, because a lot of the time with a large site, the tendency can be to plot a lot of the kind of activities that we found that actually isn't a very successful strategy a lot of the time. These even corner units that we suspect would have more footfall around them, but the points in the policy that are to do with more design elements, it's probably to try and create clustering necessary for the vitality and viability of these future centers.
Okay, I think it's in the implementation text, but there's so many words in this group, I can't find it. But I've quoted my notes here. I think it says implementation text HS3. Or beyond the boundary. I think that's the indicative one on the site map or on the policies map. The boundary.
Yes.
So the changes to that boundary. This is where it's a new centre, extended centre. Yeah. And justified, not impede principle related to the functions of the wider network. What does that mean? I can't find the words again. I'll quote it. Or put it another way.
So
Yeah. What's the count?
it's about the way that the proposal that comes forward works with the boundary and the requirements of wider requirements, because a boundary is space, right? So in that sense, not everywhere in that boundary will be uses, there'll be rail, there'll be various other to it. And the way these work into relate could give rise to a scenario where, for example, uses is not supporting the function of the center, it might be closer to that of the town center, for example.
Because the boundary is expanded out, so it's got bigger.
Because the boundaries expanded out, or because the uses put in there at a scale that does not meet the
Let's move on to Silver Arcade as a case that we're still addressing, and also as an example, I suppose. So we've got a specific boundary. I'm looking at the policies map now, because I'm thinking about policy HS proposed extension to with one main road. Yeah. So this extension would take it into the allocation. It's got a broken dotted line. Cuts across part of the water.
So,
I'm looking at the policy.
yeah, which is fine because yes,
It's the same shape.
Yeah.
And what is it? And two, let's say, what is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm looking at this from the town centers methodology.
I'm looking at that. That's what I'm examining.
Yes, I know. They match though, so it's
Yeah, they do match. So the indicative map here goes across the mirror of the application. So before I go over to Silvertown Keys, you go back to this reflects the planning history, the site growth study, the retail growth identified in the 2020 study. So those three things informed that.
yes, to an extent, it's our starting point for extension to essentially exist.
Yeah.
Because obviously what's coming through as resolution to grant is very different to this. But at the time we were considering this, there was still negotiation being had around what happens with
Let me just forget the planning application for that. Well, no, I suppose it's relevant. But it just, in very simple terms, you've got this existing sector that's on the other side of the main road, and there's going to be a lot of new homes built. Capacity to identify for more floor space. So it's in this centre area. So you've got the main road, you extend it across, and it's an extension rather than having a separate area of maintenance centre uses. So, yeah. So, and it's as simple as that, rather than it's the natural bit that.
yes, it connects to the existing primary shopping area identified for the existing part of the local centre, and it also ties in with the LR station and extends the pontoon dock and heritage elements that we would want to create attraction to the centre.
So the main town centre use is principally going into the top. And then the reason it struggles the water
is to activate so right next to the water on the other side, although I suppose it would be very small, like a T shape of that T shape. Is Silo D, it's one of our designated heritage site. And one of the aspects we want to activate, and that's part of the is about bringing in any heritage relevant to town centres and trying to activate them through the town centre designation. So this brings it forward in order to try link them. But it's limited still in its scale because of the limited extent of data being identified.
And the other thing I just wanted to look at before we when it talks about an extension to the centre, it refers to the criteria 3, doesn't it?
Yes.
Which brings into these various specific references to sizes and things. They're all quite small scale.
It is. It's all to do with the recommendations of the Leisure study about what a typical local centre would look like, the kinds of smaller scale businesses and smaller units, and the fact that they're meant to be serving their actually stations of the higher rated centres.
So this is the 400 metre catchment. So 20 units, at least 20 units, all pretty small, 80 to 100 metres. So it's that small collection of
yes, with some flexibility in it, because obviously there will be cases where they don't want things.
Okay, so that's understood. But then we've got what Silvertown Partnership are proposing, and various other policy aspirations, objectives that you refer to, one of which is the role of this area for attracting visitors, as well as serving other residents. Supporting the visitor economy, these are the roles. And then, of course, your master plan and your commission, your application for significantly more different types of developments, then it would be into 80 to 150 square metre small units. But because I really we're talking about cinemas, like music venues, theatre, thousands of square metres of uses, so something quite different to a local centre. Yeah.
Firstly, the reason we're here is because it's slightly changing circumstances.
Okay, right. Okay.
We have a resolution to grant.
Oh, well, can I just go away and forget about this?
That's good news on the to get there. So thank you for everyone involved in that. That's great. But going back to the policy point, I think we're not really disputing the wording of policy HS1, because that's primarily because of the kind of we refer to it as an atypical local centre because of the two functions. As you read out earlier, there HS1 table 3, local catchment, retail, leisure services, community, as well as supporting the destination. So in very broad terms, we do have 7,000 homes that are now approved, so that's a population of around 4,000 at least, plus 6,000 people working on this site. So we are aiming to meet catchment needs, and that's what our own leisure retail evidence that it is. There's a very big increase in population and workers here, so there is service through a local centre, as well as supporting the visitor destination. Now the visitor destination is linked to a wider Royal Docks objective to Excel as well, etc. And the key point then that we've made in our reps is around the, if you like, the geographic representation of that local centre, which we obviously now have the resolution to grant planning permission, and that has the distribution of those town centre spaces in a basically wide distribution that is shown on the draft policies map. So our request is the ability to work with the council, hopefully on second around on an alternative and larger local centre boundary. Because we're not disputing its role in this function, but I think the geographical location of it is what does not reflect the wrong debate, does not reflect the higher planning resolution to grant.
Okay, and the main difference.
Key points.
Yeah, so the main difference being it would be further west on the frontage on the main road.
So if I can describe it, so it's from the North Woolwich Road.
Yeah.
It goes up what we call Spiller Street, which is basically the main street that takes you to the Millennium Mills building to the north,
yeah.
which then takes you to the bridge over to the
yeah.
And that's primarily the first part of that function, which is the local category. That's where zone 1 and 2, where most of our retail are. And then the second strand of the function, which is the supporting visitor destination, that's primarily food and beverage, which some of it is around zone 1 and 2. There's also some food and beverage, what we call zone 3, which is around the dock itself. And that's because they're very close to food.
Yeah.
So our view is that those two functions, both from a land use and a geographic perspective, reflect the objectives of the wording of the policy. And so that's why we'd like to work on an alternative boundary for those.
Okay.
It might be worth saying North Woolwich Road, it reflects what council's ambition is to link it to the station, dock station, and also create crossings down into Royal Wharf and the centre. So it still functions as an extension and be complementary, etc.
And just to add one other point that you did mention, the objective for the centre to link into the Silent D building, which we fully agree with, but that's actually not shown within the current move map. The Silent D building sits outside of that, and the town centre very much do include it.
I suppose the question for the soundness of this plan is, does it need to be modified? I mean, does it facilitate what you want to do? I suppose the question is when we talk, I suppose it comes to the bullet points in the box, 3, local centres potential, extension, meeting the local catchment, and also supporting
incidental in the sense that it is still a local centre. We recognise that there is a need really in terms of accessibility of the site to create a bridge linking it to the Excel centre, which in turn will mean that some of the visitors visiting Excel might end up in the site, but not creating such a scale of destination that they would want to necessarily. So incidental is just because they're walking by. In a sense, that's the typical function of a local center rather than a town center as a drawer in its own. So that's the challenge.
So the council doesn't want to attract additional visitors with new restaurants and pubs on the dock. The bridge that comes across.
It's based on a retail and leisure strategy, which identified based on the overall need that there isn't sufficient capacity to support both town center in Riverside as well as the docks. Overall, what we're having to do is have the overall amount of retail and leisure that we have to do. And I will point out that the retail and leisure impact assessment submitted with the town application was reviewed by the leisure study. And although it's passed in terms of the retail impact assessment, in terms of the leisure quantum, which pointed out a substantial amount of various uses, it draws a high risk in the assumptions made about what the site can support and the overall quantum and potential impact in terms of overall market and trade draw, and it potentially risking the future of Better Riverside as a destination. Because obviously there's only so many people, so many businesses that can come into Newham. So it's like really them. The town center that's in a local center that still has a water frontage and etc. So the retail and leisure study recommended Better Riverside because it's already having a trade draw. It functions already close to a center, but it just needs diversification. Versus here taking a local center approach, we can still provide leisure to recognize the wider potential movement and heritage of the area, etc., for placemaking purposes, but not create a destination. That was the point of the policy. And how it's written, exactly. So overall, it's about strategy and managing across the borough the level of impact with the road.
Okay. So, but the council's resolution to grant, despite what you just called the qualification that you said that your retail and leisure consultant's assessment of the leisure impact is different from the practices. But notwithstanding that, it's been approved.
It's been approved, but there are conditions to it to come back to us with a revised impact assessment on the leisure uses, because the overall quantum is not yet clear to us, the extent to which we're not specifically on the side. So in that sense, for us, it's at this stage unclear. And there are, so the permission is based on maximums and criteria related to these one and these two, I mentioned that as for the future local center, and a quantum at which point a need for a further leisure impact assessment would be necessary. And the change, I suppose, could be for the 7,000 square meters that we currently looked at for this boundary to what that up to an impact assessment quantum could be, which is probably around 1,000 square meters. And it doesn't include it doesn't include, because we don't yet know where in the site, for example, will be located the cultural venue or the cinema. It's quite vague outside of.
Well, look, I don't want to get drawn into this.
Yeah, it's quite
Suppose, let me just put it this way. There was an offer or a suggestion from Silvertown that they work with you to draft it. I don't think there's anything about less than it's simply shaped of this centre on the policy map. So I'm not reaching in my mind about whether it's necessary or not. What do you think? Do you think it may be necessary to be for the future planning of that allocation?
It can help with the future management of the site, but I don't necessarily find it necessary. necessary. Because there is already flexibility in the policy as it's written for, well, master planning processes. Obviously, we're partway through the master planning, and we have a resolution to grant. It's just
Okay, well,
there is so much uncertainty about the link between what's there and starting from what the detailed application is around letting mills. It's less clear.
Okay.
That's the challenge I'm having. Actually, I'm having a boundary.
And I won't myself either one way or the other. I understand. Yes, your time.
Yeah, it's just about another week. We would really glad to try and change that if possible. I think, when we go back to those long discussion about the evidence, or being able to get the evidence based in the account that have now been approved. That had an impact on the overall population.
In the retail labour study, did we take account of the housing growth in the plan?
It did. It looks at the GLA section, but it wouldn't have looked at that specific. I've just looked at the GLA projections across the borough. And obviously, yes, this scale of development will mean that there is additional retail and leisure need.
In that very specific
location is the same case with Vector Riverside and what can help support some additional capacity there. It just really necessary.
Well, okay, well, yeah.
Which is quite a big delta into the local expect.
Well, leave it with me. So, your view on this going new town centre just across the water?
Thanks, Derek. We're just listening into this debate. I suppose it highlights two things. One is mapping out on retail hierarchy. And actually how you test things. So if you suddenly had an application for a strategic leisure use, then one thing we would want to be sure that would go to obviously the existing defined centres in Stratford and you sort of cascade down. I think it would just be what policy we intended if it ended up in an area where, albeit there are some few thousand new homes, it's not already serving a strategic need as we are. Over the river in a very short distance away.
And
that's what we actually like.
Yeah. And I think that's the danger of a plan trying to chase around captain of the planning commission. Because the plan's strategic, and at the moment it talks about incidental economy. It's like it being local centre. It also supports incidental, as the council's described. That doesn't not create a whole new to this location.
And that's exactly that's the reason we have a policy first on this one.
Right, okay, thank you. So we'll leave that as I want to scratch my head. So I think it's necessary to. But anyway, thank you for it's okay. We will. I'll shut this. I'm just going to deal with a couple of quick ones before we break and then come back to markets because there's not many of these policies. It's very lengthy. Lots of words in it. So. You propose a modification to clarify the relationship between new homes and designated centres. So that's about developing the network so everyone in the borough gets within 400 metres of the local line. The requirements for development within town centres in policies H1 and H2 are the ones insofar as they're out to Galleon's Reach, we're going to come back to those. And then there's various other policies about the scales and mixes of different uses, percentages, etc., which I'm just going to leave so no one's picked up any. They're all evidence based in the sense of the retail and leisure. I understand the broader rationale for them. I don't think it's worth me trying to go through that in detail. I'm sure you've both about going in, it's evidence based. I'll leave that. In terms of edge of centre and out of centre, policy HS3, number of questions. I think the only one really I had was regarding impact assessments for restaurants and cafes. Is that NPPF?
Problem you find with the way we set out the plan understanding this. Apologies how I'm expressing myself. What we've done, obviously, the MPF talks about sequential testing for all of the tasks uses. However, there's parts of the plan that address town center uses in a much more appropriate way. For example, the J1 policy addressing offices and social infrastructure policies addressing cultural uses that are also center uses. So what this policy is trying to do is not overlap and create ambiguity because of that. Therefore, it only relates to the main town center uses that are not addressed somewhere else in the policies. So there is a consistent approach across the plan, both the impact assessment and the sequential testing.
Yeah, I think the specific one was about impact assessment.
So it's the same approach to the impact assessment. It just sits in different parts of the plan.
But NPF doesn't require an impact assessment. All the way down.
It's retail and leisure.
Exactly.
Through the London plan, it's retained.
What about restaurants and cafes?
Restaurants and cafes are leisure.
They fall within the NPF definition.
You understand them as per the definition given to us through the retail and leisure study.
Okay. Yeah.
I think we tackled it when we were involved in the last appeal on Gallions Reach. That point very point was discussed about need for an impact assessment. So it might be worth referring back to that. Worked out the level of detail for the assessment for those restaurant units.
Yes, but it's a very specific case, and it's
not to do with principle. So the front end of that appeal decision, I'll deal with that principles.
Okay. Thank you for the offer. I'll think about what I'll just after doing that. So leave it for now, and if I think I need further clarification on that. Okay. So that takes me on to markets. The next items on the agenda are the markets, and then these markets specifically the action points. So what I'm going to do then is just have a break for 15 minutes. And pass back. We'll start there. Okay. So if you finish with your contributions, very well. Okay, don't worry. If you're leaving, I was going to say, Friends of Green Market, you could move down. Oh, that's true, yeah. Right, okay. So we will move on to the next agenda item, which is policy HS4, markets. Markets and events, pop-up spaces. We've got the policy in the submitted plan. Council's response to my question was it is justified and consistent with London Plan, policy E9, and also with the National Planning Policy in 90, because it protects existing markets and, where appropriate, promotes creating new ones. So that's the council position. It's a sound policy. However, the council has proposed what it classifies as minor modifications to the implementation text to HS 4.1 and 4.3, and also to the implementation text of policy BFN 3. So what those modifications would do would apply the health and social value impact screening assessment process to development impacting markets. Yeah. So one, it would be done by introducing that into the BFN 3 implementation text, so bringing it into the categories of use, and then that would be cross-referred to in policy HS4. So it would be a sort of consequential change to HS4. So that, and then the other modification the council has proposed, minor, would define what is meant by a market pitch. So just in terms of the changes, you've classified them as minor. However, by the implementation text to BFN 3, at the moment it specifies types of development which would require one of these assessments, the social and health and social value impact assessment. Yeah. By adding another category of development, doesn't that materially affect the policy? Because it doesn't change the policy, but it changed the application of the policy significantly.
I think we put it as yellow, didn't we, for that reason? So it's in the implementation text. So the approach was if it changed and it was linked to the policy, but it was in implementation text, it went yellow. So yeah, I'm happy for it to be made.
Well, it's just being a bit cautious, because you don't want to be making what a minor modifications and then being challenged that it actually is materially affecting the policy in the back, because you're bringing in another type of development that you're going to apply it to. So I think in that case, I mean, quite a lot of the stuff to the reason justification and implementation text, it probably is minor. And I think the changes to HS4 to then cross-refer to BFN, because that wouldn't be the changes introducing the text to those types of development. It would be through the main modification to BFN 1. So I think I would say to you, be err on the side of caution, and if it's necessary, which we'll talk about, to make the plan sound, I think it ought to be a main modification.
Understood.
And that would give it that weight as well. So that's the council's position. So we've got from Friends of Queen's Market the suggested further modifications. So you've read what the council proposes the modification and added to it. So what you've shown are these in bold is additional bits that you would suggest adding into policy HS4 itself. Yeah. And then also the reason just the implementation text. Yeah. So I've read it, and I assume the council's read it. So I think the easiest way is for me to go through that and get the council to respond to it, and then we'll see where that leaves us. Unless there's anything you wish to say by way of introduction.
I would like to make an introduction to it, to explain.
Yeah.
First of all, regarding the changes that have been made to the to the Green Street N14.
Well, I'm going to go on to that afterwards.
Afterwards?
Yeah, I'll do with HS4 first.
Okay.
And then we'll separately look at all the stuff about N14 and the modification stuff.
All right. Well, we wanted to first of all make a distinction when it's called it's markets. We wanted to make a distinction between long-established traditional London street markets and pop-up markets and food markets, which have their own different draws for different retail groups.
Yeah.
So street markets providing food, daily shopping, and feeding families as a necessity, as opposed to food markets, which are often an extension of restaurants, the restaurant restaurant customers, or lunchtime trade, and pop-up, which could be seen as sort of leisure. So they are quite different, and perhaps it's worth putting that in the policy. But obviously, we think it's good that markets are used to animate an area. So the pop-up, markets are great for that reason. And also with all these new places that are being created, they need animated places, which shows why markets are important. But equally, markets do take time to establish. So that's why the permanent markets, have a certain character. Well, our changes are based on the fact that we felt that the pop-up, the amount of text on the pop-ups was rather more than the permanent markets. And so what we did was we took some of the bits from that and put it into the permanent market bit.
Yeah.
That's the general idea.
Yeah.
And also we would like to emphasize that the policy, if this policy works, it's not a substitute for the fact that we don't believe that the form of development proposed on the site is correct. But obviously, any development that came along, this policy does need to work effectively, and that's what we're proposing.
Yeah, and it has to work it's not just tailored to this one.
No.
It's not just tailored to green. That's right. There are different types, and as you're quite right, different types of market as well, and pop-up and events and things. Yeah, so it is different.
But I suppose the policy itself puts the different types already into different sections.
Yes,
it? So
it does.
2 and 3 is number 1 is for the permanent market.
That's right, and I understand. So yes, understood. So can I just go through with the council, and you can hear what the council response is, and then we'll see where that leaves us, and you can come back.
If you need to, there are various reasons for certain things.
Yeah, so I've read what you've been before, and you've explained some, so I understand the background, and we'll come on specifically to the policy relating to Queen Street as well after this. So let's just go through this then. So the first one would be the first sentence of HS4, which rather than using the phrase internal or external, it would use the phrase indoor or outdoor market. Your view of that?
They're synonyms. I think the policy would work the same way regardless of which wording we choose here. So it can be a minor change. We're not fussed really about the wording at all.
Just for straight.
Yeah, it is the same thing.
No, that's right. Let me caveat all this. I will decide if any of these changes are necessary for as to be a main modification.
Okay.
Yeah. So don't worry about that element of it. I just want to know whether you agree with it, you disagree with it, or you're ambivalent about it.
This one's ambivalent.
This one we don't.
Yes.
Right. Sorry. So then there would be a new part A, which would, before we get into the existing parts, A and B, would be its continued operation is safeguarded. So I'm not sure what that's adding. because if you meet parts B and C, I think its continued operation would be safeguarded. But that's my initial view. But Friends Queen might come back and respond to that. But your view?
Exactly the same as you said. The whole point of this policy is exactly the safeguarding operation of the policy, so of the market. So
you don't necessarily
they work together to create the aim.
Yeah, that's what I thought. If you achieve B and C, you've safeguarded it. Yeah. But anyway, okay, so fine, understood. So then we get some extra words in part B. So this is safeguarding. At the moment, it safeguards the number of pitches. Well, it says the number of pitches is maintained or enhanced. Yeah. Whereas they've suggested increased. Well, I think if it's a number, you don't enhance a number, you increase a number, don't you?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so that makes sense. So that's pitches. And then it introduces the concept of maintaining or increasing the number of traders and shops. So I suppose that begs the question, well, do markets include shops necessarily?
Not necessarily. In the case of Queen's Market specifically, from a planning perspective, we see the market as the part that includes the stalls and the kiosks, but it is surrounded by traditional shops. Yeah. For us, in planning terms, we treat the shops as we do for policy HS2 as any other shop unit, so they would be treated in that respect. And
so if we're talking about development impacting on an existing market, if it refers to the shops,
we wouldn't.
They wouldn't say that's appropriate.
No.
Okay. In terms of the number of traders, well, if you're maintaining the number of pitches, how does that relate to the number of traders?
I agree with you in the sense that
I haven't said that.
Planning policy cannot.
Carry on.
Planning policy cannot protect the traders themselves because that's the operation. We're dealing with the physical elements of land uses. So in that sense, it's about the quantum rather than the people directly. It is, as a whole, the function of the market and the traders themselves that are being considered through the social value health impact assessment rather than market as a physical element.
And potentially a market management plan, but we'll come on to that. Okay, so you'd say, no, it's not appropriate to a planning policy to refer to maintaining or increasing the number of traders because that's a management issue, but pitches is a planning issue. And there's also a clarification of what a pitch is in terms of okay, so you wouldn't want to refer to traders and shops, but you're happy to have the number maintained or increased. Yeah. And then we come on to provision of appropriate storage and servicing facilities. Well, the addition there is well cited. That adds some detail. I mean, I suppose to be appropriate, it has to be well cited, well designed, etc. But ambivalent.
Ambivalent in the sense that appropriate would cover the positioning as well as many other aspects.
Yeah. Okay, so that's that one. And then we go on to part C, which at the moment refers to the overall visibility, quality and management of the market and its public realm. But this would bring in the concept of layout, which is obviously a planning matter.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
It's okay, yes.
Yeah. Well, that's it. Okay. And then it brings on to will be improved is the word in the plan, but this would now be preserved or improved. So that's about maintaining what there is rather than necessarily changing it. And then it brings in the concept of taking into account the existing character of the market, which I know goes back to, the issue. So is that appropriate?
I would not include the preserve here because this part of the policy tries to bring out the fact that if there is development, there might be an opportunity to actually help enhance elements of any market in Newham. So we wouldn't want to dilute that opportunity by saying to preserve what's there. And in terms of taking account of the existing character of the market, we think that that is a suitable addition because, as we've heard, markets, especially the traditional ones we've had for a while, they will have their own character, and recognizing that in policy is suitable.
Okay, so that would be agreeing on all apart from the word preserved, and that one would be okay from the council's point of view. Okay, thank you very much. Then would be this bringing into the policy here, the reference to the health and social impact screening requirements. But that would, I mean, with this issue in time, how much cross-referencing goes on, by making it very explicit in BFN1 that all development impacting on a market requires to do one of these assessments. You don't really need to say it again in this policy. But I suppose in the other categories of development that the assessment is required by BFN 3, I can't remember what they are, but no, they don't. They wouldn't then be followed through and referred to. So things like hot food takeaways.
No, and also, for example, loss of green space, we don't specifically mention that again.
So you wouldn't say that's necessary to bring this in here. But the fact is, if you make BFN 3 modified, it would make it work. This would be redundant, it wouldn't be legal. But you could, I suppose, put it, you put it in the implementation text, so that's where it would fit. Yeah.
Can I just print out, there is a further modification 017 that does include our own version of point C, which does refer specifically to this policy.
Let me just find that.
It's page, between 15 and 16 schedule.
Which number is it?
It's in green. FM 017.
Okay. Oh, you did?
Yeah.
That's referring.
Yeah. Just to add the additional support to this being important. Although I do take your point that if it is to be applied across the plan, and the original modifications we had put forward, which were the yellow ones, the implementation text ones, would be sufficient.
I suppose this is slightly different in the sense that the BFN1, the assessment is a process point, and it's an implementation point, whereas this is an outcome point.
My contribution.
Yes.
Would you mind saying what you're looking at on the schedule, please?
Yeah.
I didn't get it.
No, okay. Which have you got the schedule?
Yeah.
21. Sorry, 20 or 28.
28.
Yeah. So if you go to page 15, at the very bottom of page 15, there's a reference number in the left column.
Oh my God.
It might be 16 on there. It's page number 15.
No, I do have it. So when was this done? I've been sorry not to have seen it.
I don't know why I opened it. This is anyway.
By the way, it's cited on the page.
You found it. So it would introduce a new part C, which refers to identify and positively contribute to the health and social value of the market in line with policy BFN 3.
Oh, well, I suppose what we were trying to get to here was the fact that we think that you should do that before you propose the thing. So it was trying to get the idea of an early assessment in. So I hope that can be included in some way.
To clarify, the policy does that, and it in itself, the value of the social health impact assessment is to do early in the planning process. So that is covered by that policy.
Okay.
And the drafting here that we're suggesting, I think it's just to highlight that we do recognise there's health and social value of markets. So it's just re-emphasising that point. And then, as you said, it's directing to the use is in the BFN 3 in terms of how it's implemented.
Okay, so BFN 3 and the health impact assessment guidance or whatever you have.
Yes.
Is it an SPD or a guidance? No.
We published with the Reg 19 a checklist. So there's a screening tool, and then there's also a checklist of questions. And we took that from the GLA guidance on kits, so it reflects a lot of the concerns that have been raised.
Okay, so that would then be so what the effect of these changes would be that any development impacting market would be required by BFN 3 to do one of those assessments, and one of those assessments would then be required to be used early on in the design process to inform go through that process. So that would be the way it would work. Okay. Right. Okay. So no particular disagreement in principle there to this use of this tool and this outcome about the health and social value of the market being identified and positively.
So that C is essentially what we've put in D.
Yes, that's right.
That's fine. That'll be fine.
But then it would also be supplemented by some changes to the implementation text to refer specifically to the assessment tool that would be required. Okay, so that's okay. But then finally, the one from in terms of the policy, and we'll come on to the other bits, is the reference to. So this is for where development impacting on an existing market. So this would introduce the requirement for a markets management plan. So you refer to the concept of a market management plan later on for new markets and for short-term flexible event spaces, etc. So, and then there's quite a bit of detail in the implementation text about the management plan in that context.
Yes.
Is it appropriate for a management plan for this sort of development in part 1?
Yes, it is. And if you look back at point B of the policy as drafted, it does mention improving the management of the market.
Yeah.
So it refers to it, but less directly. So I think this could be resolved with an implementation point where we could say that a development that would directly affect the site of the market, because this policy is intended to apply not just if development is about redevelopment of the market itself, but also if it's development adjacent to a market.
Impacting on it.
Impacting
so it might not affect management.
Exactly. So it has to have a bit of flexibility on it because of that. But in case there is a need for the management plan for the market to be reviewed, especially if it were to be redeveloped, then it can be informed by the detailed components that are in BFN HS 4.3, which details in implementation text all the bullet points about what marketing.
Yes. But that market management plan and those bullet points, some of them are relevant to new markets. Some of them might be more geared to short-term pop-up things.
Yeah. So I suppose it could be a case of as relevant to the character of the market, so qualifying it in some way, because I believe not all of the points in that policy will be relevant to an established market.
Okay, well, let's jump to the end of the Queen's Market, because they suggest some things that they would want the markets management plan to include, which may not all be included in what you've got already.
Yeah.
So can we just look at those without worrying too much about whether they are or aren't, or how to the extent to which they are included?
All right.
Can we just go
just in principle?
In principle, are these things that a management plan should address? So the first one, affordability, affordable store, kiosk and shop rents. How affordable store, kiosk and shop rents for traders who are secured? Is that a valid thing for a management plan to address?
Unfortunately not, because rent for markets is directed at a London plan scale through specific legislation, and that sits outside of planning. So it's the London Local Authorities Act 1990 as amended. And basically what the legislation says that across London, all markets, the rent value is based on their operational costs.
Okay.
And that means that whoever is operating the market will decide what the costs are for that year. And then there's a whole process of engagement with stall traders, which will be familiar about, where changes to the rent will be discussed. But it's completely outside of planning. And due to the fact that it's also linked with the operation of the market itself, it lends itself to the affordability because it's just to support that. It's a very hard cap on what you can ask for.
Okay, we'll see if the new Friends of Green Market got any comment about that. So to do with rents, you don't think it is anything that the management plan could hopefully do to the planning requirement?
The social value of markets is recognized. Affordability is one of the key aspects of it. It's just we can't specifically mention rent and the process of getting to that rent level. It's just in principle the idea that it is one of the types of business premise, for lack of better words, that is a lot more accessible and affordable compared to other types.
And in terms of, without me wanting to look through, if one of these management plans is a requirement of a planning commission, so that comes into the planning department, what then happens? Who deals with that management plan? Does it say who assesses it and who then monitors it?
It will be the markets team that will comment.
Okay. So it has to be written in a way that it's usable for them. Yeah. I mean, and that's irrespective of whether council's managing the market or not.
Yes, that's the point of the part 3 of the policy, where you create a new market, because in most cases it won't be the council creating local markets. In this case, it could very well be an amendment of some kind to existing management plan, I suppose, because there will probably be something already in place for all of these markets.
Okay, right. So the next one's about a process point, about how traders will be integrated in the decision-making process, every stage, change, redevelopment. So is that a management plan issue? It's not managing the change, isn't it? That's not managing the future operations.
No, it isn't. It's not about a management, and this is beyond planning at this stage, isn't it? Because it's the management plan is about what happens after implementation.
Whereas this is about the process.
The process of getting there.
Yeah.
Which is already covered through co-design elements and BFM2 primarily.
Okay. And then thirdly, the management plan would address any recommendations from the health and social value impact screening assessment.
Yes, which we've already said in our implementation text.
So that would be, okay. Right, but that's okay. We'll dealt with the management plan, and then we'll just go through the I think the only modification that you suggested to justification text is moving a sentence from one.
Because you talk. That's quite important for the market, the permanent markets. The thing about food in extending access to food, and then the sentence after is goes on to talk about the other sorts of spaces. It's just logical.
Okay, well, I'll see. What is in the Friends of Queen's Market, that block there, is actually 3 paragraphs in the reason justification text, and it moves that sentence from the 3rd paragraph to the.
Oh, sorry, I thought it was one big paragraph, the justification.
It's 396, 397, 398, and it moves that sentence from the beginning of the 3rd paragraph up to the beginning of the 1st paragraph, the 2nd paragraph. So that's where you've done it.
I suppose it's because when I custom pasted it, those paragraphs disappeared. Apologies about that.
Okay, don't worry.
But it's just that then after it's Queen's Market. In addition to markets, the policy continues to support temporary and ongoing pop-up spaces. So I think that bit about the food offer of markets should go before that. That's all.
So I think it comes back to your point about what it says about existing permanent markets and new.
Making that distinction.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think I don't know. It's certainly not a main modification. I'll leave it with you on that one. So
I realise it's not a big thing. But
yeah, I can understand.
It is an important thing.
So no objection. Then. Yeah. Right. Finally, implementation text. So you've already proposed a modification to the definition of pitch. This just tweaks it to talk about consultation with trade representatives as well as the markets operations team.
Yeah.
So
we think that there will be enough engagement as part of the design and co-design element of any scheme but the traders themselves do not have the legal responsibility to define a market in their own right, a pitch. That depends on whoever is managing the market.
You don't think that would be appropriate?
I don't think that's appropriate, unfortunately. I understand that leadership decisions can have an impact further down the line on traders, but ultimately it will be up to whoever is managing a market.
Right, the next one is about service facilities. It adds a couple of details. One's about secure parking and introducing toilets into the list.
Yeah, I'm all right with introducing toilets. I'm not sure what adding secure parking actually means, because we're not going to be building garages, so I don't know what they mean by it.
No.
Secure in what sense? Is it still outdoor parking?
Okay. And this next one, any redevelopment, blah, blah, blah. Again, it's talked about consultation with the markets operations team. This brings in the trader representatives again at this point. Is this again?
When it talks about opportunities to redevelop and improve the market, at this point it is linking into the co-design element. So we can agree to include that in this aspect.
Okay. So when you talk about this co-design, this is the general policy about
which we
haven't talked about yet, but yes.
We will.
Okay, so thank you, that's very helpful. And then there's this over the page. This is still to the implementation text for HS 4.1. So before the last one in the submitted plan talked about public realm enhancements on it, but before that there would be a new clause which would be that market operations should not be compromised by the negative impacts such as wind, overshadowing and pollution, and it cross refers to policy D6.
I think it could work, but I'm not 100% sure it's needed. Obviously, this ties in with potential microclimate impacts from building, and especially from tall buildings.
Yes.
But I believe that this is already covered as part of D4 application itself.
What's D6?
D6 is neighborliness, so it is dealing with amenity impacts more broadly.
But not wind?
No, I don't believe so. Pollution to an extent, because there will be standards that can apply to pollution.
I mean, this is quite specific to market operations and these particular things, which clearly are of concern to the users of the market. Okay, well, shall I, rather than put you on the spot, shall I put a question mark by that one?
Yes.
It seems to me that, it seems to me actually that's a policy rather than an implementation text. Well, no, I suppose it would be, it's consistent with policy 1B, isn't it? The overall quality and management of the market was probably rarely will be improved. So it wouldn't be if you're had negative impacts in terms of wind and pollution and overshadowing. So I suppose it's adding detail to that policy, isn't it?
Yes.
So it could be.
There is a reference to D6 in the management plan criteria in parts pre-implementation. Okay,
we'll leave that one. So, and then finally, the clause about public realm enhancements would add alongside any other planning matter relevant to the application. Well, I don't think that's necessary because that's always the case, isn't it?
Yes.
You can end up adding that sentence everywhere in the plan.
Yes.
So personally, I don't think that would be. Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Can we go back to principal remarks? You've heard that.
Yes, my goodness. Sorry, just to go backwards.
Yeah.
That one came from the rest of it. That other public realm enhancements is you put that in. Where is it? That's you put that in. but I can't find it.
Well, the plan as submitted says public realm enhancements should be considered as per local plan policy.
Yes,
exactly.
exactly.
Blah, blah, blah. But you've added on the end alongside any other planning matters.
No, but I put, sorry, I was referring to, that's another phrase that comes from the policy as well, alongside any other planning matter.
Business.
Yeah.
Whereabouts in the policy?
I don't know.
Okay,
It's
fair.
definitely in here. Sorry, I've got blindness. I sometimes get blindness when I try to.
No, it's a big plan. There's a lot of words in it.
Yeah, but it's all from this thing. What we were trying to do was
Move things
re-explain
out.
some of the things.
Well, personally, I don't think that. Can we go back to the beginning now and just go through? So, quite a few things the council said it agrees with.
Yeah.
It did say that it wouldn't, going back to the policy itself, it can't permit to maintaining or increasing the number of traders.
Yeah.
Do you accept that? It's protecting the pitches.
Yeah.
And the shops in your particular market. The shops.
Well, this is okay. Can I just start? Okay, or I'll talk about the shops. As we've said all along, Queen's Market is the shops as well as the stalls. Told the council this many times. They both work with each other.
Yeah.
So there has to be if someone comes in and takes all the shops away, Queen's Market will be affected.
Mm-hmm.
So there has to be somewhere where it says the shops and the stalls are, or the shops are component parts.
Yeah.
So if it doesn't say it in here, because that doesn't apply to, for example, Stratford.
Yeah.
That's fine, but it's got to be in there.
Okay.
The idea.
Well, can we think about that when we come specifically to the particular Queen's Market then? Because it may be, I can understand what the council said, that you may disagree or not, but the way they treat in planning terms the market is different to the shops, which are different land use. So generally it doesn't work.
There's a lot of sort of desk-based opinions, which and what we're doing by being here is trying to explain how it actually works.
Yeah, sure, understand. But I think we'll deal. Can we look at it again when we come and look at the specific policy?
Okay, so the shops,
because that's reflecting the particular character of the market. It's a mixture of those shops, physically and functionally linked to the actual market stalls in between them. Yeah, understood.
So then the first part about the continued operation, the idea of that is that it shouldn't stop operating.
Oh, I see. That's the continuing point.
Yes, because and therefore the clause that you set sorry, I don't know your name. It's terrible. What's your name?
Antonia.
Antonia, which Antonia pointed out was just to do with it will be preserved and improved. That's but it was about the idea of it should continue to operate. Okay. Otherwise, the market will be harmed irrevocably if it has to stop working.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well. Okay. Move on then to C. We'll come back again. Let me just go through, and there's a limit to how far we can go through all the detail of this, and it may be that I'll just have to leave it. So C, the council accepts, apart from preserve, because that may not be strong enough. But they do say, except taking into account the existing character of the market.
Yeah, but I mean, what's wrong with putting preserved in?
Well, in some cases, it may be that it's not good enough. It's just
That's true. No one's saying that it shouldn't be improved.
Yeah.
But it could be someone says we're going to come in and put a roller coaster in. That's a great improvement, but that might not be appropriate.
Yeah.
Even just keeping what's there. After all, your scenario is that someone comes in and does a development and then restores the market. What if it's unrecognisable? So improvement, I think preserving what's there is to some extent relevant.
Okay, well,
it's again, maybe it's.
But I mean, I think the more important one for you is taking into account the existing character of the market. Because, okay. Right. So then the following one about the health and social impact assessment, we've dealt with that, I think, because it's the council's got a modification and it's also got a modification implementation.
Yeah, and I guess we'll be talking about that a bit. on that.
We will.
We'll be talking about
that's right.
health and safety. Yeah, how that actually works.
And then the council also agree about the markets management plan in principle being applied in this case, being more explicit about that.
Yeah.
And then we looked.
No, I think you said that the market management plan was about implementation.
And yes, I think that there is already reference to it as part of our the existing policy.
What
and in that sense, just an implementation text will help clarify.
Okay.
When
I suppose I'll just say this, and then you can decide how it should be put into the thing. But it is very important that if somebody comes in and takes over and does all their development and then they're in charge of the market, we need to know how that's actually going to happen in very great detail. And that's why actually they need to say what is their management plan in some regard before being able to get the go-ahead.
Yeah, okay.
So and that management plan does have some detail that we would need to be in there.
Yeah, okay. Well, I think I understand the point you're making, but if we point to part 3C, when it's applied in that case, it's actually in the policy, and it talks about the proposal being supported by an adequately resourced pop-ups and markets management plan. So that's in the policy in that case. Yeah. So it does seem to be comparable to put it in the policy in part 1, doesn't it?
Sure, I'm happy to do so. Well, it will have to be carefully drafted in the sense that sometimes it will not be necessary.
Okay.
Depending on where the development actually sits compared to the market.
Yes, of course. So, sorry, go back to that point because this is all development impact.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, leave that with me. I understand the point.
Will definitely be needed.
Right. Okay. So back to the management plan. If we jump to the end of your suggestions and go through what the council say that could and couldn't be referred to in the management plan. One's about the affordability of the rates for the reasons the council's explained. And secondly, not about the decision-making process at every stage of the redevelopment, because that's the management plan's about the future operation management. Yeah, not with transition period.
Okay, the affordable bit.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I don't know whether there are ways of enacting affordability in other scenarios. But given that we're saying that the market's affordable, the reason it's affordable is the rents are affordable. So there has to be something to say that.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think there have been various changes to here and to the Queen's Market one, which referred to part of the character, the important part of the character being affordable. But I think the council is right in the sense that there's a limit to what this planning policy can do in terms of setting affordable rents.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, right. Saying about, okay, I'm very worried about the answer about the traders, how traders will be integrated into the decision-making process. Again, sorry, are you saying that this management plan is after the thing is done or before?
Well, it's submitted as part of the application, but it would cover the operational period rather than the development.
The complicated part here again is the fact that if we're considering a management plan for an existing market, there could be a scenario, and that's highlighted in, I suppose, part A, because it says the protection for the market should be both during development, including temporary arrangements, and upon completion. So there could be a temporary need for relocation of the market stall somewhere else, in which case there would be need for a management plan for that, as well as the final market. there's the implication.
So the management plan would, to that extent, cover the transition?
It should cover the
Okay.
transition, yes.
Okay. So if that's the case, what's wrong with this clause that said when this management plan's being drawn up and it's going to cover that transition, it involves traders in the process of deciding about how the transition takes place?
I think it's because there are elements that can be negotiated on, like perhaps where between options of where they might relocate, for example. But there's a limit, I think, to the extent to which the market operator themselves will be able to open up those discussions to the traders themselves. And the overall vision for the plan, for the physical aspects, for how you get there, are covered in the FN2. The management of the plan is the operational aspects of it, which are beyond what we can ask for, I think. We can give an indication of elements that would be covered in it, but I don't feel that planning can dictate to the landowner to say, you have to.
Okay, right. I think I'm going to move on.
Can we not come back to that, please?
Well, I think there's a limit. We're getting extreme detail.
I haven't been able to come back on that point.
Briefly then.
And actually, it's the crucial point, which is that a market is a combination of small businesses all together. So the idea, and if you look at any problems with a market, you will always see that the problems lie in the fact that the traders aren't being consulted. The traders actually know best how to do things. For example, who should go at the front, who should go at the side, what the combination of things, they know best. When they are not asked, everything falls apart, as we see a lot. And so it should be, in order to keep the market going, if that's what you want to do, the involvement of the traders needs to be a component part of any management of the market. And to think that this new person comes in and just thinks, oh, I think we'll have a sauna over there, without finding out how it actually operates is wrong, is totally wrong. And it's totally against what we're trying to say here. We're trying to protect this place for all the reasons we've already said. So I think the involvement of traders is definitely...
Okay, understood. Right, I've got that. So I'm making a note. There's things that have been agreed, there's things that have not been agreed, and there's things that are in between. So I've got that. So we'll have another iteration of this at some point.
I'm sorry, because it's quite difficult. Because I've only just given it to you, then we've only just got the...
Yeah, and look...
I don't really know what the process...
Well, the process isn't normally that you can provide me with this sort of thing.
I didn't realise. Well, because last time, just to say, I'm sorry I don't know all the process.
No, it's fine.
But this last time, when you said, well, where's some text? I said, I'll give it to the council. So I thought, I'll give the text to the council before. I didn't realise...
No, okay, it's fair enough. I mean, the idea
is that wasn't about discussing the text.
The idea is, ideally, to make this manageable in the vast majority, is when I publish my questions for people to respond to. This is going back in the autumn. If you want to propose changes to the plan, that's when you write them. And therefore, everyone has a chance to think about them. And then we come to this discussion and you've done it. It's not that, it happens at the last minute, but but I've accepted it. It's been helpful. So, we are going beyond what the normal process is here to accommodate this sort of thing.
I didn't realise that.
So,
but I mean, equally, as we've said, the detail is terribly important.
Yeah, I understood. Yeah.
Changing a small thing can change.
Yeah. Okay, so going back, so I think we've dealt with the bits on the second page. And I think we've dealt with the policy. So was there anything else the council, back to the trader representatives. Well, I think on the very specific point of where you're talking about a pitch being defined, the council didn't want that to be referring to trader representatives, but I think you'll make the same general point, would you? That you do think that is something.
I mean, it's just the definition of a pitch. Number of pitches. Oh, sorry, defined. Yes, fine. Yeah.
That's a smaller point, but the more general point about trader.
Because also just don't rely on the market operations team. You can't just go and look at how dirty it is. You can't rely on them.
Okay, and then finally, so on the bottom one where the reference to trader representatives was, that's what the council said yes to that. That's good. Yeah. Okay. So I'll just have a think about the other reference as well. And then the only other point of the council saying we couldn't really commit to is the reference to secure parking in all cases.
I suppose it means that there's this thing called the compound where you can lock your car and you can do your unloading and stuff. So
right.
It's got to be somewhere where people can.
So when you arrive to bring your stuff from the day, it's where you then put your vehicle for the rest of the day when you're on the stop. And
people also keep stuff in there, but that's to do with storage. It's just the idea of
it may not always
a place to unload space.
Well, we've got unloading space and parking space. So it's just the commitment to the parking space being secure and what that implies might be difficult to achieve in some cases, I suppose. Right, okay, thank you. So that was helpful. I'll have a think about how much of that is necessary for soundness and the extent to which things have been agreed and the area of outstanding. And I will deal with it in the usual way. Now we're doing for time. So I do want to talk again about the council's proposed modifications that to policy N14 that flowed on from the discussion we had in December, wasn't it? Yeah. So you saw my action point, which was about the council drafting a modification to ensure that policy N14 is clear and therefore effective with regard to the role and the characteristics of the Queen's Market that it's aiming to protect and enhance. And we'd had a discussion about what those characteristics were, and you tabled a paper at that point, haven't you, and made some points about that. So the council's picked up on that and proposed these changes to the neighbourhood profile, the vision, and policy N14 itself, which hopefully you've read.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. Good. Okay. So, do you want to just comment? Do you want to just go through those and say if there's anything you disagree with?
Okay.
Or if there's anything that's missing, I suppose. So those two, you don't need to necessarily say that you agree with it, because it's whether there's anything that's not there or needs to be altered, I suppose.
I think we were generally, we welcomed the changes.
Yeah.
We particularly welcomed, this is quite important, we particularly welcomed the part where it says driving, in the first part, driving footfall and spend in the wider Green Street town centre. You know where that is at the beginning?
It's modification FN045 at the end of that.
Oh, yeah, the end of the paragraph.
So that is something that's very important and hasn't really been picked up by the council forever. They do a study of Green Street and then a study of Queen's Market. And the key thing is the people who come from to and fro. And we must remember this is a very successful high street. You know, there are lots of very unsuccessful high streets across the UK. This is a successful high street. So the crossover between those two things is very important.
Good.
So it's good that you brought it out, and it's good to remember that, because if you harm one, then you harm the other.
Okay, good. Then the vision.
Yeah.
Sorry, is there anything else on the neighbourhood profile then? Let's
No.
take it. No, okay, so you're happy with those changes?
Yeah,
The vision has got a reference to specialised low-cost food and goods market.
Yeah.
Which I think reflects some of the wording that you proposed.
yeah, it does.
Yeah.
And the other thing, yeah.
Yeah, go on.
No, the word services at the top, sorry, going back to the previous.
Yeah, yeah.
That's good because that reflects things that go on in the shops, actually. Services such as hairdressers, that goes on in the shops. So that's good to have in. Yes, I mean.
So then, sorry, on the N14, it introduces the concept of it being an affordable, culturally significant, diverse and covered market, which is what you referred to before.
Exactly.
Okay. And then it brings in the reference to the social and health value, getting the words in the wrong order now, assessment is getting late in the day, and some other changes there.
But I suppose, as I was saying, can we somehow describe the shops? How do we get the shops on?
Was just what I was thinking. This is where it would come in, wouldn't it? So when it talks about a covered market and the relationship with the shops, I suppose would be something that's what's a covered? What's an indoor market and an outdoor market? An indoor market's in a building.
Yeah.
An outdoor market's a street market with canopies and stuff.
Yeah.
And then Queen Street's a bit in between. It's a covered market with shops.
So in fact, it's on the highway. That's the funny thing. It is actually on the highway, but the highway is built in. So
there's that road off is actually highways.
Yeah.
So the market stalls are covered with a roof.
Yeah.
Not just stalled.
Yeah.
Tops or whatever you call them. Yeah. And then you've got the shop. So is that something that needs to be referred to here?
It can be to recognize the character of it. Perhaps in the main sentence, cover market, and
associated shops.
Yeah, associated shop. Yeah,
very nice that it's the mix of the two things together.
Yeah, that would be very good.
Yeah. And in this case, we do recognize there is a connection between a lot of the storage is in these shops.
There's a lot of
then there's the management of the toilets and everything else is included in these. Both units on the side. Yeah.
And by the way, just to say that this idea about indoor and outdoor, it's just internal market. Sounds a bit like an economic term in economic.
Yes,
it's just a more common.
I think I agree with you. Okay. Fine. Right. So anything else on that? I don't want to go back over the whole issue about, tall building zone and the potential redevelopment. This builds in all these safeguards to deal with what may or may not be put forward, which is beyond the scope of this plan that isn't actually proposing necessarily.
I mean, on that subject, the safeguards, if there were to be a giant development, that would really be very, very damaging it would stop it and so on. Whereas you could argue that something smaller and more discreet would be less harmful. So still, I don't think this is, we've just got to make sure that these policies cover all eventualities.
I think that's the best we can do in the plan. That's right.
But still bearing that in mind.
Yes. Yeah.
Because, to be honest, the temporary side hasn't really been covered. I mean, say you had to move it somewhere else, which you couldn't really, but, we've got to make sure that that's covered. I don't know whether it is.
Okay. Right. Well, that brings it to an end here for today. I will consider what we've just discussed and deal with it in the usual way. So I've just got a couple of other items on the agenda, but I don't have really many questions about them. We've dealt with the hotels anyway. Visitor evening and nighttime economy policy, I didn't have any questions about. Health and wellbeing on the high street. This picked up the hot food takeaways and gambling premises. So you say it's a continuation of an approach that's been used since 2018 in Newham. We had a long discussion about it in the London plan. Obviously, there's a London plan policy. You say that you've been monitoring the effects of this approach since 2019. So that's interesting. And you say it has been effective in limiting the proliferation of further takeaways and betting shops.
Yes.
Right, it's interesting. And limiting the concentration of the types of gambling premises. So when you say it's limited the proliferation of takeaways and betting shops, does that mean it's been successful in refusing permissions and winning appeals?
Already, yes.
Yeah, in line with the policy.
There are no longer any appeals.
Right, okay. So it's through, the pressure was there still, but the policy was effective in saying no to it.
Yes, and continues to be. We still have
Yeah.
people coming forward with requests, but if they're in a concentration zone, we will be able to say no.
And I can't remember the precise criteria, but it's the usual things about concentrations, proximity to schools, and those sort of things. Okay. And do the restrictions apply to developments in town centres as well as outside?
Yes, it's across the borough.
Yeah. Right. I don't suppose, I mean, it's probably, people to ask, but I'm all interested whether there's any ongoing assessment of health changes. I mean,
Yes,
changes in health.
We do monitor this through our the usual authority monitoring report. There are small improvements we are seeing, and I can't necessarily say, there are studies to show that there is a health benefit in stopping further ones coming through, because obviously then there would be more access to these to people, and that means probably they would go because they're right there and more.
Well, that was the theory, isn't it?
Exactly. So there's been loads of studies around this and trying to quantify how much money the NHS has saved from this. Irrespective of that, the council is working across its policy team and the public health team's own projects to improve the quality of the offer of food and to improve healthy lifestyle across the borough. So in that sense, we are seeing improvements in the health of people in the borough, and we would like to maintain the approach we have because it has been effective.
So in terms of you saying improvements in health, when you look at the indicators of obesity and in different age groups and those sort of things,
they are still higher than London, but compared to what they were, they're improving.
Okay, interesting. I mean, obviously the relationship with that and the number of hot food takeaways is, you did say. I mean, I did see there was a study, I think it was in Gateshead, where there was a university study looking at it, and there was some correlation that they managed to identify. But
I think there's a professor at Newcastle University that specialises in it. But it comes down to the obesogenic environment. Like there's so many factors, it's really hard to say pinpoint out that it's that one. It's like a build-up of factors.
But it's interesting you say in planning terms, anyway, development terms, it's been successfully applied. Right. Delivery-led businesses, these refer to dark kitchens and dark shops and micro-fulfillment centres. So these are these sort of increasing uses that have come about. So when we talked this morning about the definition of industrial, these uses fell within that definition, I think, didn't they?
They do, yes.
Yeah. So these are uses that would be appropriate on sale and mill and retail parks. What about the local mixed-use areas and the micro-business areas?
They would. So policy HS7 only serves in extending where these specific uses would be acceptable to the council under the criteria in it, so that they can also be functioning as parts of existing high streets.
Okay. So outside those industrial locations.
Yes, so it's not actually, it's like the industrial locations plus these additional ones, because we recognize they serve a specific function that is more neighborhood related rather than just in industrial locations.
I know what a dark kitchen is. What's a dark shop?
We've had one in Newham. I don't know if it actually functions anymore. It's basically where people do not go in. It's almost like it's a warehouse, basically. It functions as a warehouse.
Yeah.
People order online and they get their shopping delivered online.
Yeah.
It's a dark shop in the sense that it's the quick delivery, like in the 1 hour. I don't know if you're familiar with the various services I get.
Yeah.
It's that.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So it's not the dark kitchen's where the food's actually prepared, cooked, and then the courier comes and takes it off.
Yeah.
So this is a shop. It's not necessarily preparing food. It's
the typical shop in terms of the kinds of goods that they would stock, but they are in a warehouse and they just get delivered. Exactly.
Okay, right. So we've got that one, and then hotels we've dealt with. I think we reached the conclusion. And then the very last item on the agenda, I don't think I really need to. It's about the plan accommodating what is identified as needed, and the whole in terms of retail and leisure. Leisure floor space the plan doesn't refer to a leisure floor space requirement as such, does it? But no. And we've talked about that study and the approach taken, which is locational rather than quantified.
Yes.
And the role of places. Quantitative. Yeah. Okay. And in terms of the retail floor space and household growth and whatever, that's exactly the approach that's fed into these new extended local centres.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Thank you. Okay. So I've finished the agenda for today. Thank you for your contributions. That was helpful. Thank you for patiently sitting through the afternoon and hearing various things. But hopefully you've got something from this, and hopefully Friends of Queen's Market feel like they're making some progress in terms of. So what happens next is I will have to think about what the council's proposed, what you've proposed, what we talked about today, and I'll set out in a note, and as I have done previously, about any steer about the changes that need to be made to the modifications. And then what will happen is at some point, all the modifications will be subject to consultation. So anybody will have a chance to comment on them in writing. Whether we'll need another discussion about any of the two things, the markets or the Queen Street, I don't know. It depends on what I think about these to be modified and how different it is. I mean, I think we've certainly given it a good airing. So that may be the last time we actually discuss it, but I'll see. And you did ask me earlier about tall buildings. Again, that still is. I did refer you to where the council's modification is. Did you find that? Because
I haven't seen it yet.
No, it isn't in the schedule.
Oh, okay.
Right, it's in their response to the action points from week 2.
It's a reference ED
019.
19.
19, ED 019, yeah.
Okay.
And the reason it wasn't in the schedule is because it was more of a potential modification rather than proposed modification. But we did talk about it as you tried to listen to yesterday, I think. Mm-hmm. So there was a discussion, but out of that there are some further thoughts that may need some further work. So there may be another version of it before we get to the end of all this. But you may want to look at it because, as I say, it does allow tall buildings in town centres, not just in tall building zones.
Yeah. Right.
You're not worried.
Well, we all know what that means.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's just that at the end of the bit of Christmas, you said, no, I don't want to hear any more. I just I've done enough for today. I've got what I need.
Sorry if I seem to.
No, it's fine.
I'm always feeling the same now.
I understand that. They're always at the end of the day. I understand that. It's just that you gave the impression that we could just sort of slightly finish that little bit that we were discussing on that day. That's all. So I was going to do that.
Yes.
And then just a few little bits and pieces, but maybe I should put them in writing or something.
Well, I think probably you should have come yesterday, really.
I was going to come yesterday, but I wasn't able to. Right. I thought I'll listen to it on the thing.
But I think
I wasn't on the list either.
Well, yes. Sorry.
I didn't know that tall buildings was not on the list yesterday. It was
It was on the agenda that was published.
Was it?
Yeah. Sorry.
I mean, how do you keep up with this?
Well, sorry. What the programme officer can't do, well, the way you keep up with it is looking at the website. So when
every day.
Right. Okay.
I was looking
apologies.
I thought she sent me a thing saying, for example, that today was at 2:00, and she sent me that a week ago at least, because I was asking what time do you think it would be.
Well, the agendas for this week, including yesterday with tall buildings, were published last week.
Right.
Sorry. But what the programme officer can't do is go and tell everyone what they think they're interested in.
I just didn't realise it changed. I just didn't realise it changed day by day.
Well, it's not day by day, but the week before any hearing session, I will publish agendas that will potentially change what's being discussed on that day.
Right.
Okay. So if you want to look at what's going to be discussed in week 4, on the 3 days in week 4, you've got an initial hearings programme, which is broadly it, but I may add things to that, and that will be published next week. So there'll be an agenda for week 4, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It will be published next week. So
okay,
I'll look at that. If I decide tall buildings need to be back on the agenda for week 4, we've also talked about possible reserve days, haven't we? Which I think we're talking about mid-February, so the beginning of the 16th.
Yeah.
So again, it may be something else that comes along from that. So I know it's difficult to keep up, and I know it's particularly difficult for people.
Professional.
No, exactly. I know it's difficult, and I try to accommodate you as best I can.
Thank you.
So, professionals have got staff and facilities and used to dealing with all this. I know it's more difficult process to engage with for community representatives. So, yeah. But anyway, it's very helpful to have your input. So thank you.
Okay. Well, we would appreciate that. Like 10 minutes of just some on the tall buildings, if you can.
Okay. Well, I'll have a think about that. Okay. Good. Thank you. Right. So we'll finish there. It's Thursday, isn't it? Yes, it is. So that's the end of the day. We'll be back the week after next. As I said previously, I will do an action point again from this week. It depends what they are, but hopefully there may be some to be able to have any response next week, depending what they are. Potentially.
Yeah.
And if not, I'll publish it and I'll give you the opportunity to say what you can and can't respond to before we come back for week 4. But it's in everyone's interest to move on and discuss it if we can, so that we can minimise having to come back future dates. Okay. Good. Okay.